Beyond Belief Sobriety is a podcast that explores topics of interest to people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. And today, my guest is Joanna Conti, the founder and CEO of Vista Research Group, a company that helps rehabs measure treatment outcomes so they can improve what they do and help more people. She's also the chair of the board for Conquer Addiction, a nonprofit that helps families and those who are struggling with addiction find rehabs that have the best success rates. And these two organizations fit really well together. And there's an interesting story behind them that I think you'll like to hear. Joanna, welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. It's a pleasure to have you here.
John, thank you so much for having me here today.
Could you start? I think the story behind the story is you and your background. Could you give us a little bit of information about yourself, your background, just as a way of introduction, and then we'll just kind of go into the story behind these two organizations you started.
Fantastic. Well, I'm the mom of four, a serial entrepreneur, have had a very diverse background, but my interest in addiction treatment started when one of my daughters developed a very serious alcoholism problem. And she was repeatedly drinking to lethal levels or potentially lethal levels. And over the course of quite a number of years, I found myself in the emergency room with her on different occasions where she had blood alcohol levels, far beyond what people often die of. And sometimes she'd been airlifted there. I mean, we really went through
Wow.
the ringer. And each time it was very apparent that I needed to find really effective treatment for her because her life depended on it. And unfortunately, each time I was forced to rely on a chance comment that somebody had made here or there. One time it was at a picnic a couple of months before. If you ever need treatment again, you might check out this place. And so in these moments of crisis, I would try and remember what people had told me, and would call these different treatment centers. And of course, they were always so nice. And I would say, and what's your success rate? And they'd go, oh, trust us, we're one of the best. And the good news is we always found really effective treatment. And as a result, my daughter has been in recovery now for about 9 years and has completely turned her life around as the loving mom of two little girls, has a wonderful career, a loving husband, home in suburbia. I mean, all the wonderful things that we really hope our kids can grow up to achieve. But when the worst was behind us, I said, I don't understand. Why isn't there a better way for the families coming behind us to find the treatment centers with the best outcomes? I mean, we're all thrown into this world that we know nothing about. And the stigma behind addiction is such that even if your next door neighbor might have gone through a very similar thing with their child or their spouse, they probably didn't talk about it. So you're thrown into this world where your loved one's life depends on your being able to find really effective treatment, and you don't even know where to start. You don't know what questions to ask.
So is this how you came up with the idea for the database, the searchable database that you have now?
Yes, when the worst was behind us and Karina was apparently on her road to recovery, I decided I would create a website where families searching for treatment could put in whatever they were looking for. I need it in this state. It needs to take this insurance. It needs to be this type of treatment, 12-step, not 12-step. I need it to be detox or outpatient, or, I need it to take this particular medication, whatever is of importance to the families. And they would just enter this information in a minute, and then they would get a list of all the treatment centers that met their criteria, with those with the best independently verified success rates on the top of the list. So I created this website back in 2015, just kind of as a side project. I was running a different company at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And then I started talking to treatment center owners, and I had a big list of treatment centers across the country. And I was horrified to discover that there were only 5 treatment centers in the entire country
Wow.
who were tracking their outcomes and would share their results publicly.
Incredible.
It is incredible. I mean, this is healthcare.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
my daughter had leukemia, I would be able to go on the website and I would be able to find, which doctors were having great success with different treatments and which hospitals had the best success rates and so forth. And yet for addiction treatment, there's really been nothing that existed.
And you're an engineer, so you're a problem solver. So you have a, you have a problem here, right? And you looked at solving it, and you're also really good with data. And so you kind of, I guess you knew that you could find a way to, if you could get this information from these treatment centers, that you could probably do something that's helpful for the public. I guess, is that what you kind of went through your mind?
Well, I almost gave up. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's like, what do you mean they're not, this is addiction treatment centers aren't monitoring their outcomes? That's crazy. But instead of just giving up, I guess I'm pretty stubborn.
Right.
I decided to go to one of the addiction treatment conferences and
Yeah.
start talking to different treatment center owners.
Ah.
And I said, I don't get it. Why aren't you tracking how effective your treatment is? And enough of them said that they wanted to, but they didn't know how to do it. That I
Interesting.
thought, well, there's a business opportunity here. And as I mentioned, I have a very diverse background. I
Mm-hmm.
am a chemical engineer, I'm a researcher. I've started international nonprofits. I've even run for Congress, of all
Mm-hmm.
things. But one of the things I had done was I had taught myself how to program. And I had
Ah.
spent 5 years running a software company in the 90s.
Oh, interesting.
So I could look at the problem of how would you cost effectively measure the effectiveness of addiction treatment. And I thought, we can figure out how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, as a side project, I started Vista Research Group
Okay.
to measure the effectiveness of addiction treatment. And then shortly after I had started down that path, I was digging into all of the academic research
Mm.
behind addiction treatment and what makes it most effective. And I discovered a study that showed that if you ask patients how they're feeling during treatment and report those results to their clinicians in some very easy to understand fashion, that patients get better faster during treatment. So I said, well, that's an obvious thing to add to what we've been provide or what we're planning to provide our treatment center clients. So we have been providing both during treatment monitoring of the patients. That's live in real time. Everything's done online,
Mm-hmm.
on a tablet or a phone or a computer, and is shown to the clinicians in very easy to understand graphs instantly. And then once they leave treatment, we follow up with the patients 1, 6, and 12 months afterwards to find out how are they doing? Are they meeting their treatment goals?
And what, how would you define success and whether or not a person's meeting their goal?
Well, it's kind of interesting. There's 2 very different camps in addiction treatment and in the recovery community. There's a group that really believes in their heart of hearts that you to really achieve long-term recovery if you have an addiction, you need to stop ever using drugs or alcohol again. And we'll call that the abstinent group, the
Right.
abstinence group. That's the traditional addiction treatment centers. And then there's another group that believes that the most effective way for some individuals to regain control over their lives and to stop using the heaviest drugs that they might be addicted to is to follow some harm reduction policies. So, maybe somebody's been injecting opioids for several years. That person might say, I really want to never use opioids again, but if I want to have a few beers on the weekend or smoke some pot, don't hassle me. I will still
Okay.
consider that a success. So most of the business that most of the treatment centers that Vista has worked with up to this point have followed the abstinence model, but we're in the process of doing similar research with medication assisted
Right.
treatment centers. And in that case, we're allowing the patients to tell us, this is what I consider success. At the
Interesting.
start of treatment, they will say, I don't want to use any meth. I don't want to use opioids. I don't want to use amphetamines, et cetera. But I think it's okay if I use alcohol
Right.
occasionally and marijuana and, whatever. They could tell us each type of substance what they consider success for them, and then we will measure how they're doing against the goals that they set themselves.
Okay. So interesting. So you're actually, while they're in treatment, you're monitoring how they're doing while they're in treatment, and then you follow up afterwards. And how long is that period after they get out of treatment again that you follow up?
Usually it's 1, 6, and 12 months. We
Oh,
want to
okay.
see how they're doing over the first year. We have a couple of our treatment centers that follow up for longer than that. It gets harder and harder to reach patients because
Mm-hmm.
people's cell phones change. And if they've
Sure.
been in recovery for several years, they think, why are you still asking
Right.
me these
Right.
questions? That was the old me. I've gone on with life.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, we follow up for a year.
And I read that it actually takes 2 years of data for you to know really how they're doing, how treatment center's doing.
Well, the challenge is we consider 1 year outcomes
Okay.
the most important statistic, and realize that we want to monitor a reasonable number of patients. So it typically takes a treatment center a full year of
Sure.
discharging patients or bringing new patients in so that the clock starts, and then at the end of 2 years we have a year's worth of results for a year's worth of patients.
Mm-hmm.
But we do report 6-month data also, and of course we report 1 month data to our clients also. But what we found is that there's a higher percentage of patients who are typically meeting their treatment goals at 1 month.
Okay.
On average, we found that about 42% of patients are reachable and say that they're meeting their treatment goals at 1 month post treatment, or, for in the
Mm-hmm.
abstinence short term a model of treatment. And then typically it will drop to about 36% of patients who say they are abstaining from drugs and alcohol for at least the last 30 days at
Mm-hmm.
6 months or a year. And we know that this is a chronic disease. So, if somebody relapses maybe 4 months after they've left treatment, but they're able to regain active
Mm-hmm.
recovery, we consider that success.
Yes, I think that's how more people that are professional that deal with addiction are looking at it. Is, they're treat recovery being a process of change, so that if you have a lapse, but then you get back on your recovery plan, that you haven't lost anything, you're still moving. But then there's another thing, such as a complete relapse, where you go back into the behavior full time and for an extensive period of time. So that is interesting that you would look at it that way, and that's from what I've been reading is how a lot of people are looking at it now. It seems to be anyway. So I was wondering, um, how many now that you started doing this, how many treatment centers have you been able to get to provide this data? How many are you working with? Has it improved a lot or much?
It's been surprisingly difficult
Yeah.
to get a lot of treatment centers monitoring their outcomes. Over the years since we've started, we've worked with, well over 100,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 150, 200 different
Wow.
treatment centers. And what we find is that the treatment centers that sign up with us and stay with us, because we have a lot of long-term clients who've been
Mm-hmm.
monitoring their outcomes for years, they tend to be of a particular mindset. They tend to be people who really deeply believe in helping every single one of their patients as much as they possibly can. And they want to know what their outcomes are, and they want to figure out how, once we know where we were last year, how do we keep improving. So we offer performance improvement workshops and other things where we work with our clients to help them continually improve. And one of the most exciting things we found is that among treatment centers that are doing their outcomes, that have been monitoring their outcomes for more than a year, more patients are in recovery the second year they're monitoring their outcomes versus the first. On average, 20% more patients are doing well 6 months or a year later, on the second year that a treatment center has been monitoring their outcomes. And I think it's because Peter Drucker was right. What gets measured gets managed. If
Yeah.
you can measure it and see how you compare to those of similar treatment centers, then you've got a baseline, and then you can figure out, well, maybe if we do more of this or a
Right.
better job of that, we can help even more patients.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I mean, you can learn, what you might want to change in your model to help more people. Is Do you know, is there any advocacy work going on to maybe get state legislatures or maybe even Congress to, and if not, if it doesn't have to be a law, can there be some sort of regulation or either a regulation or a law in place that requires rehabs to have their report their results?
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
There was a congressional committee meeting a couple of years ago where several congressional members said, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to have a site where families could
Wouldn't
go and they could have
it?
the treatment centers ranked, by independently verified success rates? And I'm thinking,
What a great
yes,
idea.
yes, we could do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know that this is going to be, coming from government.
Mm-hmm.
And the insurance companies and so forth talk a lot about
Yeah.
doing outcomes, but what they tend to mean is those things that they can more easily measure in their data,
Mm-hmm.
in the data they're already collecting. And they tend to focus on more process oriented things like, did somebody contact them 30 days after they left treatment? And did they have to be readmitted to a treatment center?
Mm-hmm.
What we're really looking for is that person doing well? I mean, we're looking at it from a family standpoint. I want to know, is my daughter going to be alive and thriving a year from now? Is she more likely if she goes to Center A or
Right.
Center B? That's really the question that we were trying to answer from a very consumer standpoint.
And also, you mentioned earlier on that the database is set up so that people can search for, programs that fit with what they want. So I often will get emails because this podcast is kind of the niche for this podcast is people that are seeking a secular way to recovery, and a lot of them are kind of shy of the 12 steps. And I get emails from people asking me, how can I find a treatment center that doesn't press me to do the 12 steps? And I said, I don't really know until I saw this, saw your website.
Well, what happened? Yes, there's a group that really loves 12-step
Yeah,
recovery
I know
type
they're out
meetings,
there.
and there's another group
That doesn't
that's
like them at
like,
all. Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And we don't have a
No, you
pony
don't.
in this
No,
race.
you don't want to get into the mess of that fight. You really don't.
I believe that for different people, there's
Exactly.
different
And
roads
that's
to
the truth.
recovery, and we need to help them find the road that they think will be most successful for them.
And I bet
And
your data shows that. I
yes,
bet
it
it
does.
does. That you can see that if you can tailor the approach, meet the person where they are, and give them the type of treatment that is best for them, you'll have a better outcome, I'm sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's no perfect treatment. I
No.
mean, we have we provide excellence in treatment awards through my nonprofit Conquer Addiction for the treatment centers each year who have proven that they have the best post treatment success rates. And some of them are 12 step all the way, some of them are the opposite of 12 step. One of them was talking at our meeting where we gave out the awards this year, that he was convinced the reason their program was so successful was all about the family program and
Yeah.
bringing the families in.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone has their different approaches. And the wonderful news is there is a lot of really effective treatment out there. There is some that is maybe not so effective, but you can find really effective treatment. And that's the great news.
So when I love the website, by the way, for Conquer Addiction. It's designed so that anyone, it's very easy to use, and you can find what you're looking for. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you rank a rehab, and you have a 5-star rating score, I guess. I wonder how you go through that, and is there ever a time where someone might get bumped up a star or down a star?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. The any treatment centers that want to be ranked on Conquer Addiction, which, by the way, for anyone listening in, it's conquer-addiction.org.
Conquer-addiction.org.
conquer-addiction.org. But what they have to do is submit outcomes research that has followed the standards set by Conquer Addiction's independent panel of judges.
Okay.
So we got a number of experts in research techniques and addiction treatment to set what they consider to be a standard for outcomes research. And any treatment center that is following this standard is welcome to submit results to Conquer Addiction once a quarter.
Gotcha.
And they have to keep their results updated once a year.
Okay.
So every quarter, treatment centers have the option to submit new data based on the most recent year, and once a year they must submit new data, or they'll stop receiving their ranking.
Okay. So I imagine, I haven't actually looked up rehabs in Yelp, but I imagine that a lot of people do that. Have you ever
Yes.
used Yelp to look for a restaurant or something? So that I imagine isn't as good as as what you're doing. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, you're the difference between a scientific research and ranking someone based upon data, and then the personal opinions that you might read on the internet.
Realize that this is a very competitive
Yeah.
industry,
Yeah.
and treatment centers will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to advertise for patients. In the past, there have been all sorts of horror stories
Yeah.
about patient brokering and
Yes.
stuff like that. Fortunately, I don't think that happens as much. But most of the websites that you will find when you search best rehab near
Mm-hmm.
me or whatever, most of those are owned by either a treatment center or by someone who is taking the
Interesting.
information on that patient and providing it to people they have an agreement of some sort with.
Mm-hmm.
Also, people who work in the industry have told me, many people have told me, that it's often part of your admission counselor's job to try and make sure that some very positive ratings go up on Yelp and things like that. And
Uh,
they may or may not be true.
mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, it's you're already in crisis,
Right.
and it's very hard to determine what is really reliable information. And
And you
that
have to
was
make a fast decision.
exactly, you're in crisis. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember one time my daughter was in the hospital, and the doctor pulled me aside. She was in there, with an incredibly high blood alcohol level, and he'd asked her, he said, you're taking poison. How do you decide how much you're to take?
Mm-hmm.
How much to drink? And she said, I just guzzle. Right? So he pulled me aside. He said, I can keep her for 24 hours, under a broad
Right.
umbrella that
Because
she's a
she was in
risk
danger of
to
herself.
herself.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But you have to find
Wow.
someplace for her in 24 hours. And so, I went back, and fortunately, in the middle of the night, my mind dredged up this
Mm-hmm.
conversation from a picnic 6 months before. And I was able to go back to the ER the next morning. And fortunately, my daughter was able to be talked into going to this center. And, you know, she, as I said, we went through the ringer, but my
Right.
daughter was a very wonderful person, and she did want to get sober. She was just
Mm-hmm.
scared to death of it, of
Yeah.
life without alcohol. Like so many people who are addicted, they don't understand how wonderful life can be without it, and it's part of the addiction. It's very scary
Yeah.
to agree to try and stop using.
So I read one of your blog posts that I thought it was interesting. It said, be skeptical of the treatment center who claims like an 80% or 70% success rate. I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. When I was searching for treatment centers, I would call the different treatment centers that I'd heard of and or that I found on the website, and I would ask them questions. And I always asked about what their success rate was. And I had a number of centers tell me they had 80% success rate. I had one owner tell me he had 98% success
Right.
rate. And
It'd
I
be
thought,
great if it was true.
in what alternative
Right.
universe do you think I live in that I would believe that? I mean, this is a very difficult disease, and unfortunately, it often takes more than one attempt
Mm-hmm.
for someone to achieve long term recovery. This is also a very difficult group of people to catch up with after treatment. So when Vista Research is trying to reach these patients at 1, 6, or 12 months, we will reach out to them by text, by email, by phone. We will make 10 to 15 attempts to contact them each time. We will pay them a little bit to take the surveys. We'll instantly send a Target or a Starbucks gift card as soon as they submit the survey. We promise the patient's confidentiality so
Mm-hmm.
they know they can tell us they're using again, and it won't be devastating to their clinician that had worked so hard with them while they'd been in treatment. And we also will reach out to locator people like a mom or a spouse that the former patient had given us permission to contact in case their cell phone number no longer works, for example. So we work really hard to reach out to patients after treatment. And we typically can reach about 50%,
Wow.
45 to 60% of patients after treatment. But somebody who tells you that they've got 80% success rate or 90% success rate, what they're probably doing is reaching a tiny fraction of their population and saying, well, we contacted 50 patients out of the 500 patients that went through our treatment center last year. And of the 50, 45 of the 50 said they were doing
Right.
great. So we have a 90% success rate. Well, it doesn't work that way
Right.
because the 50 people who you were able to contact are far more likely to be doing well than the 450 that ignored you.
And it's more like in the 36%, 35% range, the
Yes,
success rate now. And are you noticing a different, but you're noticing a difference, I think, for those that do measure it. So I'm wondering if we could get more rehabs to actually measure their results. Do you think that that success rate overall would go up?
absolutely. I believe that is the least expensive, fastest way that we can help more patients recover from addiction is to improve the effectiveness of the addiction treatment that they're attending.
And are you the only company that's doing this that you know of? Is there anyone else that's doing this kind of work?
There are a few companies that say they're doing
Mm-hmm.
this kind of work. I don't think that there's anyone else who is reaching out
Right.
and getting as successfully reaching as high percentages of patients, former patients, as we are.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone else that's close.
Well, you had a passion for this. I mean, this is something you really believed in, and you really were wanting to help people. Plus, you had the skills to do it. You had this way of thinking to be able to do this, and to put the two together is probably pretty rare. I'm sure that there are other people that might do the research, but maybe they don't have the personal experience, to or the passion or the drive to kind of make this work.
It could be. Early on, I was raising a teeny bit of money for our company, $100,000, which for people who are starting companies, that is a
Hmm.
that we've run very
Not a
lean and
lot.
mean, but $100,000, wasn't going to make or break
Right.
the ability to create a successful company.
Hmm.
And the the company that was the governmental entity that was considering giving us this funding required me to come back in 7 times over a 6 month period
Oh, wow.
and for $100,000. And I finally said, guys, I don't understand it. What gives? You're talking $100,000. This is my 7th time over 6 months. And they said, Joanna, what you're doing is so obvious. We can't believe that somebody else hasn't done it. I said, I'm with you. I can't believe it either, but I can assure you that they haven't.
Hmm.
And I've given a lot of thought to maybe there are some real advantages of being from outside an
Hmm.
industry in
Hmm.
terms of affecting change,
Hmm.
because I could come in and I could use the same sort of research we'd used in other types of industries and stuff, and I could just say, oh, well, we could do something similar over here, versus somebody that had been in, spent their entire career maybe in addiction treatment wouldn't necessarily make that jump.
I think this is just incredible. My feeling that I keep thinking back to, it just seems like there should be some sort of regulation in place to make this a requirement, because it's like it seems to me that corporations are required to, put out their results and to their shareholders, and industries like in the medical field, I would think that they have to report some sort. Maybe they don't. I don't know. It just seems like there should be some sort. It should be required, but
It,
It's not going
it
to happen, I'm sure.
I don't think that's the way change is going to come.
Okay.
What I really think is the secret and is how change is going to happen most quickly is if families or
Okay.
individuals searching for treatment start asking about success rates, like
Okay.
I did 10 years ago for my daughter. If they are trying to decide where to go and they talk to treatment center X or treatment center Y, and they say, I really wanted my son to come here, but I don't understand. Why aren't you tracking your outcomes? If the admissions counselors start hearing that a few times, I don't think it's going to take much. I think that's going to be what is going to drive the change in the
Okay.
industry because everyone understands in principle
Sure.
that this is the right thing to
Right.
do.
Right.
But if they're not required to do it from the government or from payers or
Mm-hmm.
from families who are,
Mm-hmm.
sending their loved ones to treatment, it's always easy to say, we'll do that next quarter,
Yeah.
which is what I hear all the time. Oh, it's we definitely want to do that. Give me a call around the first of the year.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've done everything possible to keep our costs really, really low because we want every treatment center to be able to afford to do outcomes research, both the during treatment and the post treatment. And so compared to a marketing budget,
Mm-hmm.
it might be for a mid-sized treatment center 25,000 a year or
Mm-hmm.
40,000 a year to do the whole range
Wow.
of outcomes. It's not a huge amount. And this might be a center that might be spending, you know, $300,000 on advertising. And for just a little bit, they could help ensure that their patients are getting better quickly and they could measure how effective they truly are against similar treatment centers. So my request to anyone listening out there is if you find yourself where you do need to find effective treatment, and my heart goes out to you because I know that means you're in a very difficult place.
Yeah.
But if the way we're going to change this industry is if enough people start demanding outcomes. And I don't care if it's through Vista Research
Mm-hmm.
Group or
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. This is a mission to save lives. And we know a sign of success will be when there are other outcomes companies out there
Yeah,
competing
it would
against
be.
Vista. And I'm fine with that. I'm,
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to
absolutely.
that day. I just want to help more people recover as quickly as possible.
Well,
So
thank
I
you.
I
Oh, go
think I
ahead.
forgot to answer
Yes.
one of your
Oh,
questions
okay.
about how we give the star
Oh,
ratings.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry about
It's
that.
okay.
So what we do is a very simple question that we base our ratings of the effectiveness of a treatment center on, and that is what percentage of your patients are reachable and say they're meeting their treatment goals 6 months or a year after they leave treatment if they're in a short-term treatment center, or what percentage are meeting your treatment goals a year after you start treatment if you're going to a treatment center that's designed to be an ongoing treatment, like somebody who's taking Suboxone long term or something like that. So it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage basically are reachable and say they're meeting their goals?
That makes sense. I would like to, if you don't mind, I've done this before, but I'm actually going to like to do another video on that website alone. I would like to demonstrate that website, the database, to show people how to use it and how to access it, because I think it's such a great tool. And I have a little resources um, thing in my YouTube channel where I would put that so that people can, how to find a good treatment center that has outcomes that you can, verify. I just think it's important to have that out there, and I'd like to do that. So,
John,
thank
that
you.
would be fabulous. One of the things I do worry about is there are still so few treatment centers that are doing their outcomes.
Hmm.
So if somebody goes to Conquer Addiction and they search for treatment in a particular place, South Dakota
Hmm.
or something, they may not find one that meets their needs. And that's very devastating. But if enough people start demanding that treatment centers do
Hmm.
prove how effective they are and publicly share those results when they're proud of them and
Yep.
ready to share them,
Hmm.
then I think that database will grow very quickly over time.
I think you're right. I think the consumer demand is what will probably push that industry into doing that. But thank you. This has been just really interesting. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting company that you have. The work that you do is just incredible to me. I mean, there's a lot of work involved with that, and it's I know that recovery can be very complex and addiction can be complex, and it's a scary time for families when they're dealing with it, and to be able to have a place to go where you've got some reliable data to back up the effectiveness of a treatment center, or even to know what kind of a treatment center is right for your loved one, is just invaluable. So thank you for doing this. It's been it's good service.
John, thank you so much for helping us spread the word. I really
Uh,
appreciate what you're doing too.
I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.